Friday the 13th, Jason's Curse, Chapter 3, Breakfast of Champions. At 11 that morning, Miguel Hernandez, just back from his morning jog, was sitting on the kitchen counter with his powerful arms crossed. "Okay, slave," he told his girlfriend Tina, "make me breakfast." "Yeah, right," Tina said without smiling. Miguel was 18, Hispanic-American, with sexy dark eyes and a wispy mustache that he loved to stroke, but which he could never get to really grow in. He was also short and powerful and built like a fire plug. His face had an almost bulldog quality. When he graduated from Parker High last year, he'd been voted most likely to kill someone. Right now, he was wearing a gray Parker High sweatshirt with the sleeves cut off roughly at the shoulders. As he sat on the counter, he watched Tina prepare her breakfast. She poured Wheaties into a single bowl and carefully sliced a banana on top. She wasn't going to offer him any, he knew. Tina wasn't exactly the generous type, but Miguel didn't mind, just as long as she kept going out with him. Him, and only him. "Breakfast of champions, eh?" he asked her. She didn't bother to answer. Miguel hopped down from the counter and started doing isometric exercises, squatting against the wall and holding himself rock steady until his legs began to tremble. All the time he kept his eyes on Tina. Her beauty inspired him. Tina Chen was 17, a tall Japanese American with shiny black hair that went all the way down to her bottom. She had an oval face that was a real killer. Miguel made a clucking sound. "Cut it out," she said calmly, without turning her head to look at him. Instead, she studied the back of the Wheaties box. "I think Kelly was up all night again," she said with her mouth full of cereal. "Why?" "Did you see the house? The place is spotless, and her notebook is on the table here. Those are always the signs." "Oh." His legs were killing him now, but he maintained the position. You couldn't give in to the pain. Never. "The other day, I found the window seat open. I go to close it, and she's sleeping inside. I'm talking in the window seat. She nearly gave me a heart attack. She said she liked sleeping there because it was like sleeping in a coffin." "Cool," Miguel said, doing his best Beavis and Butthead imitation. Because all the isometrics, though, his voice came out all strained and tense. Tina turned to look at him. When she saw him exercising, she rolled her eyes. "I'm worried about her," she said, turning back to her breakfast. "Why?" he gasped through the pain. "Why, Miguel? In case you hadn't noticed, the girl's like totally obsessed with this Jason thing. It's not exactly what you call healthy." "Why?" Miguel repeated. "Stop it, I'm serious. All she talks about is going out to the woods and killing Jason. Killing Jason. Like anyone believes this Jason really exists. I mean, I know everyone in the house just loves Kelly, and it's like we're not supposed to ever say anything about her that's bad, but I think the girl's going crazy. I really do. Somebody ought to wake up and smell the coffee." Beads of sweat were popping out all over Miguel's face. 10 more seconds, he yelled at himself. He counted down silently, then groaned and stood up at last. His legs felt all rubbery, but he smiled and flexed his biceps. "Personally, I can't wait till we do it," he said. "Do what?" "You know, Kelly's plan. Monster hunting." "Oh, please," Tina said. "Serious. That's going to be the greatest." Like Kelly, Miguel hadn't applied to college yet. He worked at a dojo, a karate school. It was only one of the many martial arts he studied. This past week, the school was being painted, so Miguel had nothing to do. Seemed like the perfect time for a trip up to Crystal Lake. "Let me give you a little hint," Tina said. "We're never going monster hunting." "That's just something Doug likes to joke about to make Kelly feel better, you know?" "You're wrong, man," Miguel said. "Kelly's not crazy. It's just she's got this vision." Miguel's dark eyes glowed. Kelly had focus, determination, a goal, just like Miguel. Miguel's goal was to be a big war hero someday, like his dad. Kelly's goal was to kill a monster. Same kind of thing when you came right down to it. She gives me the creeps, personally, Tina muttered. It's like there's something dead about her. Well, Miguel said, she's been through a lot. Right, that's another thing. I'm tired of feeling sorry for her for what happened to her brother. You know, she's not the only one who's had bad things happen to her. Miguel sighed. It embarrassed him when Tina said bad things about Kelly. As far as Miguel was concerned, Kelly was even nicer than her brother had been. About 10 times nicer, in fact. For instance, whenever he was broke, which was most of the time, Kelly lent him money, even though she barely had any herself. And she never reminded him about it, or asked for it back. Also, if he happened by the kitchen when she was eating, which wasn't too often, she never seemed to eat, she always offered to share her meal with him. She's got vision, he insisted. Tina guffawed. She's got visions, plural. She's seeing things. The girl's delusional. Tina was so smart she had finished Parker High a half year early. She had already been accepted into New York University for next year, where she was planning on studying psychology. She was always throwing around these psychobabble terms. It drove Miguel nuts, especially when she used the stuff on him. Whatever, he said, hoping to end the discussion. He lifted the half-gallon container of Tropicana from the kitchen table and started guzzling juice from the carton's plastic spout. Hey, Tina said, that's the house OJ. So what? I don't have germs. Miguel wiped his lips with the back of his hand and gave a loud ah of satisfaction. But he didn't drink any more. Man, would I love to meet that Jason, he said. Tina smirked. Get out of town. I would. Believe me, if there really was a monster, Miguel, you'd wet your pants. Are you crazy? Me? Never. Uh-huh. I'm telling you. I'd take care of him. Boom. Bang. Miguel started shadowboxing. He glided effortlessly into kickboxing, followed by a few Tai Chi moves, and ended with a karate kick that almost knocked over the toaster. Careful, Tina warned. I'm the Karate Kid, Miguel said. You're the idiot, Tina replied. That hurt. Why was she riding him so hard these days? Miguel came up behind Tina and put his strong hands around her shoulders, nuzzling her neck, but also gripping her hard. You love me, baby, don't you? No, I don't, she insisted, squirming to get out of his grasp. Morning, guys, said a cheerful voice in the doorway. Miguel straightened as Doug Sanderson entered. Doug was this lanky, good-looking guy who always managed to look cool and relaxed. He wasn't faking it either. That was the amazing thing. Miguel had come to learn that his housemate really felt this way, cool and relaxed, most of the time. Right now, Doug was wearing black and orange Lycra bike riding pants, a black Gap pocket t-shirt, and a silver-striped bike helmet. He took off the helmet and ran his hand straight back through his soft, dark hair. If you guys want to do the dirty deed, he told them casually, I recommend using one of the bedrooms. Much more comfortable. Miguel laughed and let go of Tina's neck. You're one to talk, Tina said, batting her pretty eyes in Doug's direction. I hear you did it once on top of the piano. The piano was an old and very beat-up baby grand that Boone had rescued from the town dump, back in the years when he was using the house as his crash pad. The big black thing sat in the living room like some huge creature. It was missing half its keys and all its strings, but it made for a great table during parties, and, if the rumors were true, it also made a great place for... Doug squirted Gatorade into his mouth from a red plastic squeeze bottle. He swallowed, then he went back to grinning. Who told you that? He asked Tina. Tina started playing with her long black hair. Notice he doesn't deny it, she told Miguel. But Miguel was noticing something else, something that he noticed about Tina a lot lately. She liked Doug. You know, I always wanted to learn how to play the piano, Tina told Doug in her huskiest, sexiest voice. Very funny, Miguel told her tensely. He gave her a meaningful look. In fact, he practically went bug-eyed, giving her his best angry glare. She ignored him. Seen your girlfriend this morning, Dougie? Tina asked. Who? Kelly? Tina laughed. It was closer to a squeal. What's the matter? You don't know who your girlfriend is? Doug grinned and nodded appreciatively, as if to say, You got me there. He squirted another mouthful. She was up all night, I think. I told you so, Tina told Miguel. Doug put one of his Air Jordans up on the kitchen table and started stretching out his hamstring. Right while she was eating breakfast, too. If Miguel had done that, Tina would have screamed bloody murder, but this time Tina didn't say a word. Doug was 23. He'd been going to local community college for as long as anyone could remember, never taking too many courses a semester, and often taking the same courses over, because he kept flunking. Most of the time, he spent on girls, and for as long as Miguel had known him, Doug had been getting an A+ in that department. According to Dougie himself, for instance, that piano rumor was true. True. In fact, wherever Miguel went with Doug, he was always pointing out the sights, as it were. See that couch, Miguel? Me and Susie Rogers, right there. See that hammock, Miguel? Doug stopped stretching and crossed to the schedule he had thumbtacked to the kitchen wall. Damn, he said. I missed French again. Nice going, Tina said, but she was smiling that little smile of hers. Miguel felt his heart pounding. Just then the back door opened and Kelly came in. She was carrying a small portable tape recorder. She stopped short when she saw them. She mumbled a, Hi. Then she started rummaging noisily in the jam-packed kitchen drawers. Tina caught Miguel's eye and rolled her forefinger around her ear to indicate how far gone she thought Kelly was. Miguel glared at her. Doug laughed. So Miguel glared at him, too. Does anyone have any extra batteries? Kelly asked quietly, apparently oblivious to the effect she was having. Batteries? Tina asked, like this was the craziest thing in the world. I've got batteries in my Walkman you could have, Miguel offered. The Walkman's busted, but I think the batteries are still good. Great, thanks. Kelly unbuttoned the breast pocket of her army fatigue jacket and took out a small piece of paper, which she studied. Tape recorder batteries. She made a check mark. Shovel. Hammer, notebook, knife, blanket. Earth to Kelly, Tina said. Earth to Kelly. Kelly looked up. What are you up to? Doug asked her uneasily. Kelly took a deep breath. I'm going off for a few days. Silence. They waited for Kelly to offer more of an explanation, but she didn't, which wasn't unusual. All year, Kelly had been disappearing for jaunts in the woods. But now Tina said, Oh, God, you're doing it, aren't you? Tina said this to Kelly, but then she turned and added to Doug, She's going up there. Miguel pulled roughly on Tina's shoulder, trying to get her to face him. Going where? Going where? Tina shook her shoulder free of his grasp. She kept looking at Doug, who kept looking at Kelly. Oh, Jesus, Doug said. That's not true, is it, Kel? Tell me that's not true. It's true. I asked you not to tell me that. Miguel laughed loudly. No one else did, though, and Miguel ended up feeling foolish. He moved toward Kelly. Wait a minute. Are you talking about what I think you're talking about? Monster hunting? Kelly nodded slightly. Miguel let out a whoop. All right. See that, Tina? And you said she was just goofing. Doug crossed to the fridge and pulled out a can of Bud. Kelly, you know what? You're really... He popped the beer top and took a long swig. Scaring me with this obsession. Tina giggled into her hand. Oh, you seem really worried. Doug gave her an angry look, but the frown quickly dissolved into a smile, and the smile turned into a laugh, which meant he sprayed out a mouthful of beer. Miguel dove backward, yelling, Gross! Doug grinned lazily. Sorry. Hey, Kel, you know what you need? You just need some sleep. How about a nice hot bath, and I'll rub your back? No, Kelly said it quickly and firmly, in a way that suggested there was no way she would change her mind. Today's the day, that's all. I mean, I was sitting here this morning and thought, I've been talking about this plan of mine for a long time, haven't I? So, what's wrong with me? Am I scared or what? So then I just decided, today. Tomorrow, Doug suggested. Kelly ignored him. As she talked, she sewed the air with her hands. You know how I know it's right? Because the moment I decided to go, I felt better. Because it's like, at least I know this is going to all be over soon, one way or another, even if it kills me. There was a heavy silence in the room. Even McGill had to admit the girl seemed pretty badly messed up. He clapped his hands. Okie dokie, he said. I'm going too. Miguel, Tina said with a warning voice. Come on, guys. Miguel turned to Tina and Doug. What do you say we go up there? It'll be a blast. He turned back to Kelly. How far is this place? 3 hours drive. I've got a map, but... What do you say, Tina? Miguel put his face right up to hers. Huh? She turned away. Come on, it's an adventure, right? What do we got to lose? Our time, Tina said dryly. Doug scratched his head. How long would it take? Kelly held up her hands. Guys, this is really sweet of you. She smiled kindly at Miguel, and the warmth and life briefly came back into her stunning gray-blue eyes. But listen, this is something I've got to do alone. Alone? Miguel's voice went up an octave. You want to face that killer alone? Are you nuts? That's just it, Kelly said. Tina, I know you think this is all a bunch of garbage, but it's not. It's real, and it's dangerous, and I can't ask you guys to take this risk. Really, I don't want you to. Kelly, Tina said, you know what's out there? Nothing. Just some woods and some old abandoned cabins. I'm just saying this because I don't want you to be disappointed. There is no danger, except from maybe yourself. Great, Miguel said. Then you won't be afraid to come. I'm not afraid, believe me, Tina said. That's your department. Miguel laughed wildly. Me? I'm the one who's been volunteering to go all year, in case you haven't noticed. Guys, Kelly said, I'm not talking about a little day trip here. I'm going to be gone overnight at least, as long as it takes. Kel, Doug draped an arm around her shoulder. He tried to get her to lean her head on him, but she wouldn't. You're tired, Kel, he said. You don't know what you're saying. It's like that time I stayed up all night studying for that American history final. I thought if I didn't stay up, I'd flunk. You did flunk, Miguel pointed out. Right, said Doug. So it was stupid to lose a night's sleep over it. He guffawed and shook Kelly, squeezed her. She gave him only the slightest of smiles. Look, Kel, he continued smoothly. If you go, I've got to go. You can see that, can't you? And that's bad. I mean, I've got classes tomorrow. That brought a cackle from Miguel. Oh, like you care. And, Doug said, smiling back, I don't know about the rest of you, but visiting murder sites isn't my idea of a great vacation, so... Kelly pulled free. I'm going, she said. You're not. That's it. Doug studied her grave and serious face. Then he sighed. Okay, he said finally, holding both hands palm up. Looks like I get to go driving around in the woods. You're in? Miguel asked him. Doug shrugged. Yep. Miguel slapped him on the back. All right. He turned to Tina. So, he asked, that leaves you, babe. Where are you going to stay? Tina asked Kelly, frowning. Right where Boone did, Kelly said grimly. At the old Crystal Lake campsite. There are cabins, you know. Sounds deluxe, Tina said. Miguel laughed nervously. Look at her. Look how scared she is. What's the matter, babe? Afraid to sleep where someone got killed? Tina scraped her chair back from the table and stood up. She didn't meet Miguel's gaze. I guess if everyone else is going, she said. Then she gave Doug that tiny smile of hers. curling up the edges of her mouth and flashing her eyes. Miguel felt jealousy claw at his heart. Kelly looked from one face to the next. She felt her heart softened. "Okay," she said softly. "If you guys really want to do this," she sounded choked up, "that'd be great." Doug still had his hand on her shoulder. He pulled her toward him. "Hey, lighten up, Kel. We're just going camping." Kelly wiped her eye hard with the back of her hand. She laughed. "I think I am going crazy," she said. Everyone laughed. Kelly said, "Okay, listen. If you guys really want to come along, you got to start packing up your gear." She glanced at the watch strapped loosely around her thin wrist. "It's a long drive, and we've got a lot of work to do when we get there." "Terrific," Tina said glumly. But Miguel threw back his head and whooped. It had suddenly kicked in for him. This was really happening. It felt like they were going into battle. It would be his first. He gave a war cry. He pumped his fists. "Hey, Jason!" he shouted. "Here we come!" Chapter 4. A Treat for the Hogs. Big Red sat at the wobbly wooden table, staring down through his mask at his huge bare feet, one of which was made out of hard blue lucite. He'd been sitting in the shack for hours. He wasn't feeling so angry anymore. In fact, he was feeling sorry he'd blown away Ma and Pa. Now, who would take care of Big Red? The mask on his face was hot, almost burning to the touch. Behind the hot white plastic, his face was dripping with sweat, the water running down his face in streaks and gathering in the seams of fat around his neck. And then there were the tears. He'd been blubbering off and on all morning. But even with all the moisture to ease the way, still he couldn't slide the mask off. He'd given up trying. He looked down at the floor, at Ma's and Pa's bodies. Their eyes were open, all four of them. It was likely they were looking at him. They looked so surprised. Oh boy, he was really in for it now. Sooner or later, somebody would come by, and then they'd see what Big Red had done. Uncle Bud or Uncle Tuck would come. Boy, would they be mad. Unless, was there some way he could hide the bodies? Big Red was mulling over this problem when outside, the hogs began to squeal. The man lifted his large head, looking toward the sound. His afternoon chore. He never forgot his afternoon chore. Then he looked down again at Ma and Pa. "You're not fit for the hogs." That's what Ma always said to Pa when she was really mad at him. But she didn't mean it. It was just a joke. She had explained that to Big Red many times. Which meant Pa really was fit for the hogs. Big Red stood slowly, the metal joint of his artificial left leg squeaking loudly. He bent down and picked up one of Pa's big bare feet and used it to drag his father across the rough floorboards towards the door of the shack. Right before he had put the shotgun to Ma's heart, she had scuttled backward across the floor until her back was up against the wall. She had held both arms up in the air, pleading with him. After Big Red shot her, she had stayed propped up against the wall with one of her arms still up in the air, held up by the iron frame of Big Red's bed. Now Big Red took hold of this arm and started dragging her across the floor along with his paw. Ma's hand was cold, but still it felt good holding it. Ma always let Big Red hold her hand when they were walking in the woods on their way to gather blueberries or when they went into town to run an errand. Big Red had a little problem at the door. When he tried to drag both his parents outside at once, the doorway got kind of clogged. His father's whiskery face bashed into the side of the door, and the teeth in his open mouth stuck into the wood. The hogs were making a huge ruckus now, because Red had opened the shack door. They were smart, those animals. Pa used to say that the hogs were smarter than Big Red. Red could see the three hogs, pushing their funny pink noses between the gray slats of the pig pen fence. Well, at least there was one good thing about what had happened. Now the hogs would have a special treat. He carried Pa out of the shack first, then Ma. Then he started dragging both of his parents toward the pig pen by their hair. Chapter 5. Coming Home. Kelly drove the whole way. She insisted on it, even when Doug pointed out that she'd been up all night. Doug sat next to her in the front seat. He was supposed to be navigating, but as it turned out, though he had slept soundly the night before, he ended up doing more napping than mapping, and they got lost 3 times. Miguel and Tina sat in the back seat, with Tina scrunched all the way over to the left side, trying to get away from him. Even though Kelly liked Miguel a lot more than she liked Tina, she could still sympathize with the girl's plight. Miguel was all over her, as usual. He couldn't stop pawing at her for a second. Kelly had once tried suggesting to him that he could ease up on Tina and try being less possessive. But Miguel had gone all huffy and insulted, so she'd dropped it. Doug's map-reading technique wasn't the only thing slowing them down. First, her friends had taken forever to shower, dress, and pack. Then, Tina had insisted they stop for bathroom pit stops twice. And then, Tina made them stop at a supermarket where she bought all kinds of food and supplies. Going out into the woods with jumbo bags of cheese doodles and 6-packs of diet soda seemed bush league to Kelly, and she couldn't resist saying so. She explained to Tina how she and Boone used to go off for weeks at a time, living out in the woods, exploring. Each time they took fewer and fewer supplies. Boone said he had read somewhere that if you had a blanket and a knife, you should be able to survive anywhere in the world. "Oh, don't worry," Tina had answered with a bright smile. "I'm not sharing." Then she took out a purple flare pen and started writing TC for Tina Chin on all the bags and packages. Right in the middle of the supermarket, Kelly had let out a belly laugh, and once she had started laughing, she couldn't stop. It must have been lack of sleep, because it felt like she had lost control of her face muscles. Tina got pretty annoyed, but Kelly couldn't help it. She kept thinking about the evil they were up against, like Jason would stop to read Tina's initials before he flayed her alive. It was past 5 now, the sun low in the sky. It looked as if they were going to drive right into it. Only about 2 more hours of light left. Nighttime had scared Kelly all year. Darkness at Crystal Lake was going to be even worse. "Kelly, do you want me to spell you on the driving?" Miguel asked from the back seat. "No thanks, I'm fine." She was driving on Route 107, still on a paved road, but going through thick woods. She had one hand out the window to keep her cigarette smoke away from Tina, who kept complaining. Through the open window, she could smell that clean pine smell that they always tried to imitate when they made bathroom disinfectants. It was the cleanest smell that Kelly knew. But she wasn't feeling the usual release she got when she headed out to the woods. In all the trips and hikes she had taken this year, she had never once gone anywhere near Crystal Lake. Now every motel or shack they passed struck her as a horribly familiar, as if she were coming home for the first time in years. It wasn't that she remembered all these places from the one time she was out here. It was that she knew they were retracing Boone's steps, going back exactly the way he had gone. Kelly shuddered deeply. She looked over at Doug, out cold. He was still a comforting sight. She smiled. "So, tell me more about this Jason dude," Miguel said. "What was that one you were telling me about, that farmer who saw him chowing down on some kid's brains?" "Miguel," Tina said stiffly, "I think you ought to examine why you get off on this stuff. Seems like you've got some pretty deep sadistic impulses." "That's right, man. I'm a big sadist. That's why I'm going to pinch you to pieces." "Miguel, for the last time, get off." They made such a commotion that Kelly almost missed it. A green and white glow-in-the-dark sign by the side of the highway. The white words made her heart start to pound. Crystal Lake, 10 miles. Miguel and Tina's roughhousing had woken Doug. He sat up, shook his head, and rubbed his face with both hands. "Well," he said, "I hope we're almost home." He yawned. "We haven't even got there yet," Tina whined. "Kel, I'm telling you," Doug said, squinting at the grimy windshield. You owe us big time for coming along on this one. Kelly had begged him not to come, but she didn't feel like reminding him. The truth was, she was feeling intensely grateful that they had come along. Most of all, Doug. As she drove on down Route 107, he reached over and started massaging her neck. Your muscles are like a rock, he told her. Is that bad? She asked with a tiny smile. Doug. Carly had been extremely unimpressed the couple of times she had met him, and Kelly had to admit the relationship wasn't exactly deep. She knew his reputation, too. He was famous for his wandering eye. But Doug had been there for her all year. Without exaggeration, she felt like his steady presence had saved her life. You like him, don't you, Boone? She asked in her head. Suddenly, she jammed on the brakes and skidded toward the side of the road so sharply that everyone in the car was thrown wildly. She hit the horn with all of her might. The blare of the horn mixed with her screams. Okay, this has been chapters 3, 4, and 5 of Friday the 13th, Jason's Curse by Eric Morse. Hope you guys are enjoying this book so far. Sorry I took the weekend off. I've had a bit of a sore throat. I've still got one. I'm not sure if I'll be able to get an upload out tomorrow. I'm really wanting to let this sore throat subside because it's making my voice kind of cracky and it's hard to do this with the sore throat. But I will be back very soon as I can, with some more of Friday the 13th, Jason's Curse. Until then, check out a live stream I did earlier today with the channel JV211. Like I've told y'all before, this guy does a lot of Friday the 13th, the video game uploads, news on the game, and news on horror in general, especially slasher stuff. And yeah, I think you really like the channel, and I did a live stream with him earlier on a thing he calls Camp Talk. And we were discussing the Friday the 13th lawsuit, its effect on the video game, and what the developers were really up to of the video game, stuff like that. And also there's a petition. The petition's not just to get the DLC. The petition is for a class action lawsuit about how a lot of stuff was promised and taken from us, and maybe even exposing some lies that were told to us. So yeah, I'll put a link in the description below if you want to check out that live stream I did with him. And also, while you're at it, subscribe to him, give him a like, drop him a comment, tell him I sent you. And until next time, this has been your friendly neighborhood 80s slasher librarian saying, thanks for listening, and I'll see you next time.
I didn't know